All right. Hey everybody, Ron Bielefeld, Whistling Wings Photography. Been a while again. Well, I'll tell you, so much going on. I launched the new style speed shooter, the yoke style. You can find out all about it up here somewhere. Have a link down in the description of the video. And yeah, so I've been making harnesses because they're selling really well. For those of you who have purchased one, thank you so much. For those of you who haven't, but you think it might help your photography, it's just another tool like a tripod and a monopod and all that kind of stuff. Certain types of photography, quick action stuff, especially things when you have to move around, might be a great tool for you. Check it out. What else have I been doing? Tours. Lots of tours. Snail kites and roseate spoonbills and ospreys and things like that. And then I've actually been doing some speaking as well at some conferences. And that's really what this video is about. I went ahead and recorded one of my talks at a conference out in Beaumont, Texas. They invited me out to the Gulf States Camera Club Council annual conference to give a whole bunch of talks. And over 2 days, I just about killed myself. But anyway, I did tape some of these. Oh my gosh, that dates me a bit. Digitally record, not on videotape, one of my talks, and technological advancements in photography, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The title of that talk, and so you can see it coming up after this. And you know, it's not what I usually present, but I thought it might be helpful to some people, so I'm putting it up here. And take a look if you're interested. Hopefully, well, I'm heading down to Costa Rica for almost 3 weeks, doing 2 back-to-back tours down there. So hopefully I can put out a few things while I'm down there. Not when I get back, but of course when I get back I have to catch up on making those things again, so I don't know. I'll do what I can to get some videos out. Hey, the Canon R7 Mark II is supposed to be coming out this year. Nope, I'm not doing a speculative type video on that camera. Nope, I'm not. I will do one when I get the camera, which I will get it, and I shoot it for bird photography, and then I'll get back to you with what I like, what I don't like, what I found. I'm really hoping this camera is a step up from the original R7. It's got to be, right? Canon says it's going to be more upmarket. Maybe it'll be more like the 7D Mark II, which is everybody that shot that camera really wants the R7 to be. So we'll see. Hey, enjoy the talk coming up, and until next time, I hope you have great light. I hope you're getting great images, and I'll see you soon. Oh no! See now the bar is. You just blew everything there. Thank you. Hey, thanks for being here. We can work on some questions even as we go through this way, if you'd like to. And this is my second round of this. I did one of these talks yesterday, and I just did my second talk on my other topic before this one, and they've been running right up around the 2-hour mark. So if you can deal with listening to me for 2 hours, it's an accomplishment. Let's put it that way, I guess. So we all, how many of you are shooting mirrorless now? Right? Anybody still hanging on to digital SLR? No? Yeah, right. Film? Anyone film? Right? No more film people. I run into those. I do a lot of day tours. I take people on tours to shoot birds, and not shoot them, but take pictures of them. Yeah, I know. And sometimes I've got a guy next to me or a woman next to me, and they've got a film camera along with their mirrorless, R5 Mark II or whatever. And so it's kind of cool to see that, because I started out, my dad was a photographer. That's how my interest in photography started. And so I've had a camera in my hands from the time I can remember. My dad was not a nature photographer. He worked for a company. He managed their photographic and printing department for 32 years. So anyway, they did scaled photography back then and all that kind of stuff. But I was interested in that. Then I got interested in birds because he was a birder and a nature guy. So we went out doing that. And it kind of melded together over time. But my main profession, I went to different places for education. And so I spent 30 plus years being an avian research biologist with different state agencies, finishing up in Florida after 30 years working for Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. But you don't make any money working for a state agency as a research biologist, so I had to have a side business. That's where the photography of birds came in. So it's been all kind of mixed up and melded together for a long time. And now I'm retired from my state job, and I'm doing all this kind of stuff. That's it. That's all. And I come and talk to you. So blame Dennis, Tim, for bringing me here. So anyway, we're going to talk about advancements, though, right? Everybody's shooting mirrorless now, just about. Man, we've come a long way in photography. And I'm not just talking about film to digital and now digital SLRs to mirrorless, but I mean, even just within the past few years, within mirrorless coming online with all these advancements. And boy, I'll tell you, it's blowing my mind a lot. Before I say anything else, though, you see these things? I don't want to take these home with me, so take them with you. They're catalogs for Wimberley. They're the reason I could come, because they funded my travel and everything to come here. And they're a great company. They make tripod heads and plates and all that kind of stuff right here in the United States. They are a family-run business. If you have any issues or questions, you call them, you get a real human being. Okay, so they're a great company. So buy from them, talk to them if you can. So there's my plug for Wimberley. Now we can move on to the real good stuff here and talk about these advancements in camera technology, lenses, and everything else. I'm going to talk about 4 general things. Okay, I'm going to talk about cameras, and when I say cameras, I mean the sensor and the processor and the camera and what's happened there. And then autofocus systems are a huge one, of course, that we as bird photographers, this is birds in flight. This is relatively speaking, we're talking about birds in flight here. We might drift over to other things, who knows. And then post-processing, boy, right, AI comes to mind right away. We'll talk about that a little bit. The good things about it, the bad things about it, because there's always bad sides to this stuff, it seems. And then there's one ugly thing I want to talk about at the end that all this advancement is kind of bringing upon us, okay? So, and then as we go through, especially the bad parts of this, try to see about avoiding some of these pitfalls that can come along with this technology advancement that we've seen. And along the way, oh boy, me being up here is bad enough. Now you got to see me twice, so I don't know why I even put that in there. But the good stuff. So let's talk about resolution, right? When we first started with digital, right, what we were shooting? 3 megapixels, then 6, then 8, then 10, then 12, then 14, 16, 20, and all the way up now, what are we shooting? 50, 45. For bird photography, I mean, there's more out there. Of course, you get a Hasselblad and shoot over 100 megapixels. That's not for bird in flight, though. Remember, we're talking about birds in flight here. So 45, 50, right? And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Why is it? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? Some of these things we're trying to shoot are not very big. A tiny little tree swallow out there. And then even when it's right here and you're shooting 600 millimeters, it's still not filling the frame. So having those extra pixels on your subject gives you more croppability and stuff like that. And you can make some nice shots without too much pain. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and they're fast. Fast. See, I love it when people anticipate things in here. It's great. So the next thing, of course, beyond resolution, we're going to talk about these things in more detail, okay? I'm just kind of outlining it here right now. Frames per second is what I mean by that. We just talked, what are we shooting now? What are we shooting frames per second? 20? That camera right there, full raw images, 40 frames per second. 40, the R1, Canon R1. This one, the R5 Mark II, 30 frames per second. Okay, and it's like, oh my God, well, why? Why do you need that? And we'll talk about the good parts of it. The good part about it, of course, is that when you're trying to get images like that are up there right now, this is a midge, right? A little bug on the water. It's hard to see because the resolution of this projector isn't very good. But between the bird's beak here is another midge he's about to eat. This is in the air, flying at 60 miles an hour. It's a probability game we're playing out there, right? How many times have you heard people say, if you can't get the shot with 6 frames per second, you're sure the hell not going to get it with 30 or 40 frames per second? That is wrong. It is wrong, wrong, wrong. It's not spraying and praying. So many people have said that too to me. It's like you're just shooting all over the place hoping you get a couple good frames in there. No. I'm trying to get these birds. Right now, these tree swallows are migrating through Florida, our Florida lakes. They depend on midge hatches to eat all these midges, millions of them, to fatten up and keep their migration going up to the north to breed, right? So we go out there and there's tens of thousands of tree swallows and the midges are hatching and they're flying, picking midges. Getting a tree swallow just in flight is nice, but I don't want that. I want a tree swallow in flight just before it grabs a midge, right? That the difference between this midge being way out here off the frame and being right here is a split of a second. 40 frames per second is a lot higher probability of getting these midges in the frame where you want them than 6. You could go out there for 30 years and shoot swallows in flight, and you might come home with one image where the midge is where you want it. Now you go out at 40 frames per second, and you're shooting the same thing, and I'll come home with 10 or 12 of them every time. That's the reason why frames per second and this advancement to these very, very fast frames per second is a really nice thing for us bird and flight photographers. This is one example. Just the example of a harrier flying by at sunset, and it happens to glance at you, right? It's looking for prey, and then all of a sudden it glances at you as it goes by and then turns its head. That's a split second too. You're going to get more of those eye contact-y kind of shots and stuff the faster frames per second you shoot. Okay? So that's a good thing overall. ISO, right? ISO settings to the amount of noise you see in your cameras. Boy, there's been advancements there. Not as much as some of us would like to see, right? We'd like to be able to crank this sucker up to 200,000 ISO and it'd be clean, and still capturing detail and all that. Well, physics are physics, right? And we're never going to get to that point, but we've come a long way. I can remember shooting at Canon cameras. I've shot mostly Canon. I've shot Sony and Nikon too. But, ISO 400 was like, woo, you're pushing it, getting some noise in there. The dynamic range of those raw images weren't the greatest. You tried to bring up the shadows and all that noise. Now, okay, well, let's see. This camera, now let's start with the R5 Mark II. I'll shoot 10,000 ISO on that camera. I'm not cropping in to 2% of the frame shooting that high ISO, but if you're going to keep most of the frame, birds are pretty big in the frame, you're going to do a modest crop, no problem. R1, how about 30,000? I will shoot ISO 30,000 on my R1. That's, come on, A little bit. Again, you're not cropping into, a tiny speck of a bird out there. It's not going to work, But amazing advancements, and that's brought some pretty amazing stuff that trickles over to photographing birds in flight. So let's talk about the high resolution thing in more detail here, the higher resolutions that we're able to get now, 45, 50 megapixels. The obvious one is croppability, right? Again, birds are tough to get close to a lot of times, and a lot of them aren't very big. We're not all out shooting, golden eagles all the time and stuff, these huge birds. A lot of times we're shooting these smaller birds, even medium-sized birds like short-eared owls and stuff. So the croppability part of it is great. How many of you wouldn't even consider a camera now that wasn't 50 or 45 megapixels? You shoot birds, right? That's why you're here, right? Would you shoot a 24 megapixel camera anymore? Okay, and I can't fault you for that because there is so much good about these higher resolution cameras that croppability is one of them. I still shoot a 24 megapixel camera, the R1, but boy, the low light, like I said, capabilities of that camera, that's when I use it, okay? It's only 24 megapixels, but I'm shooting when you're not, that kind of thing, So anyway, along with this then comes we can use shorter focal length lenses, right? Because you don't have to be shooting 1200 millimeters now. We got a little more croppability now. It's nice when you're shooting birds in flight to have lighter, smaller lenses because you can shoot all day long, not get tired. They're quicker to move around and pan with fast subjects and stuff like that. So along with this resolution comes the ability to use some shorter lenses. When you shoot shorter lenses, a lot of times, like that's the 200 to 800, right? It's not a short lens necessarily, but I'm sure it's a slower lens though. So we can, f9 at 800 millimeters, but with that comes a little more depth of field. But again, the same thing kind of all rolls around in here is that we can stop down more and all that kind of stuff. And that's some advancements in high resolution allow some of that. And along with the shorter focal lengths, we got wider fields of view. You ever try to get on a flying swallow right here with 1200 millimeters of focal length? Your field of view is like, really tiny, and it's very difficult to even find it, and then you just stay on it, right? So now let's back out to 400 millimeters instead. We've got the resolution to crop in a little bit more, much easier to find your subject and stay on your subject. So some really good things about this higher resolution. Along with that, shorter focal lengths, less relative motion to your sensor, right? So that allows you to capture sharper images of your birds at, say, slower shutter speeds and things like that. So there's a lot to come along with high resolution other than just the croppability part of it. Now, we'll move on to the good part, the frames per second. I already said, what do some people say? If you can't get it with 6 frames per second, you're not getting it with 30. We already covered that. To capture fast action. I mean, some of this stuff happens, the stuff that I want to capture, birds in flight, it's not just a flying bird, right? It's when that bird is capturing that midge, or I use snail kites a lot as examples because I do a lot of snail kite tours in Florida. They have a special thing that they do where when they're hunting, they hunt like harriers, they hunt low over the marsh, but when they see a snail, they've generally passed by it a little bit already. So they, oh, there it goes, I saw a snail. So they flip over in an instant. I mean, it's like, whoa, like this. Wings spread, tail spread, looking back. It's dynamic. It's awesome, but it happens like that. And if you're not shooting, you're not getting it. But when you are getting it, the fast frames, you get everything, right? You get every potential 40 frames per second position that bird is in. And you want that key frame, right? You want that capture the moment. The moment. This is pretty good, this is pretty good, this is pretty good. Oh, that's getting better. Oh, there we go. Tail spread, wing spread, light hitting it just perfect, that kind of thing. The probability game, again, goes up with the frames per second. The ISO thing, higher shutter speeds, birds in flight. How many of you shoot routinely your birds in flight at 1/250th of a second? Right? 1/250th, right? No, that's not right? No? I do. I'm just kidding. We want to get up over 1/1000, 1/1250, 1/2000, 1/20. Hey, some people, I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of people that have some sort of aversion for some reason for shooting really high shutter speeds. Like there's some penalty for shooting at 1/8000th of a second. Or now with these mirrorless cameras, you could shoot 1/30,000th of a second. You have to be in the sun to have enough light, but you know what I'm saying? I don't know why people, but I've run into a lot of clients that just say, 1/8000th of a second, oh my God, like it's going to reduce the dynamic range of the picture. So I don't know, but they won't do it. If you can do it and you're shooting birds in flight and you're after the action stuff, then do it. 1/8000th of a second, absolutely. But we're not always in the light and all that kind of stuff that we can deal with that. But being able to dial in higher ISOs will get us into the realm of shooting birds in flight early in the morning, late in the evening, sooner, or we can shoot later because of these higher ISOs that we can now dial into our cameras. So, and then it gives us those higher shutter speeds quicker to where we can capture the action that we really want. Allows you to stop down more, right? You've got better ISO, you can crank it up there. It's bright. Let's get it more. You don't have to shoot at f2.8 anymore on your 400. Maybe first thing at sunrise, yes, but you can stop down a lot quicker as the sun comes up, build in some depth of field because, on a bird like that, depth of field isn't a big deal. It's a tiny little bird, and it's probably going to be, even if the focus is on the eye of the bird, that far wingtip is probably still going to be within the realm of the depth of field. Not so much on a bird like that, though. If it's close and you're shooting 2.8 or something like that, and you get focused on that bird's eye, and that wingtip is sticking out that way, hell no. It's way outside the depth of field. It's not going to be sharp. Okay, but we can stop down a lot quicker and a lot more to tailor the depth of fields that we're shooting for what we're shooting, the scenarios we're shooting now with these better ISOs. Again, slower, but lighter lenses. That's this thing, right? Because you can crank up the ISO now. F9, but I can crank up the ISO a little bit more. I can get my shutter speeds, and I can shoot a slower lens, a lighter lens, and I get that built-in depth of field, right? People get enamored by shooting these really, really fast lenses. The 2.8s, I call that really fast for what we do, right? 400 2.8, 300 2.8, 600 f4, 500 f4s, because it gives you that milky background, right? And you're separating your subject from the background. That's a really cool look. You just can't really reproduce very well with something like an f9 at 800 millimeters. That background's got to be pretty far back there to get it milky like you do with 2.8 or f4. But you know what? There's something to be said, though, for bringing that background into a little bit more of a focus to where it at least gives context to where that bird was flying or something like that. And I use it a lot. I'll stop down, and I want to stop down, and it's built into a lens like that. Like when I'm shooting barred owls on a lake that has cypress trees as the background with all that Spanish moss hanging down. I don't want that to be milked out into a nothingness that you can't tell what it is, but just some colors back there. Of course, the owl's separated beautifully. Instead, I want people to be able to just make out that that's a cypress tree with that's just moss hanging down. Just adds context. What people want to buy and put on their wall is not some freaking bird huge in the frame with a blue sky background. That's not what they want. That context a lot of time. Birdscapes are very popular for people to actually buy as art, put on their walls at home and things like that. So sometimes being able to shoot these slower lenses, you don't forget about the fact that, hey, I can stop down and all of a sudden it's pretty bright out, and all of a sudden you realize you're still shooting at f4. What am I doing this for? It's already kind of built in, because wide open at 800 on that lens is f9, okay, and it's bringing you that depth of field automatically. So, and more croppability again. If there's too much noise, I don't care how many megapixels you have, the detail's not being captured because the noise is masking it on your subject, and you crop in and you got nothing, But now, not only is the noise less, but what I'm seeing in these cameras now is the structure of the noise that is produced at higher ISOs. It used to be blotchy and ununiform. Okay, so it would be blotchy, bigger pieces of noise. What is noise? Are there pieces of noise? I don't know how you describe it, but blotchiness, not fine-grained noise, but blotchy noise. It really destroys detail quicker, right, than that fine-grained noise. What I'm seeing now in these cameras, even at higher ISOs, is yes, there's noise, but it's very fine-grained and very uniform. So the noise reduction software that you can use now within Adobe, if you use that, or if you use Topaz or DxO, whatever you use, it can pull that noise out much better, retaining the detail in your bird's feathers, because before noise reduction would say, oh, all that feather detail, that's noise. Pull that out of there with the noise, and you have plastic birds and stuff flying around. So now it does much better, but that fine-grained noise does not obscure the details of your bird's feathers and stuff nearly as much. So with this better ISO, we can crop in a little bit more, even at higher ISOs, even at a little bit higher noise levels, and still retain enough detail to make a pretty nice shot. In the end. Cameras. And all this that we just talked about, there's bad sides to this stuff too. And so much good. There's just no doubt about it. I wouldn't get rid of anything we just talked about because the bad stuff outweighs the good. It does not. But there's some pitfalls that can happen with these technological advancements that I think you might want to know about and try to avoid. And that's what we're talking about here. High resolution. Okay, there's a pitfall that I call a change in philosophy. That's what the res stands for. We're talking here about the higher resolutions that we're shooting now, 40, 50, 45, 50 megapixels, and that croppability. It's great to have that croppability, but I'm seeing people now, my clients, are using it as a crutch. Okay, my philosophy has always been in my bird photography to go out in the field and capture in camera as close to possible the final composition I have in my mind that I see, right? It's not to go out there and just see a bird way the hell out there and there goes a roseate spoonbill way out there and take a picture of it and then depend on cropping when I get home to crop way in, and I can crop more, obviously, like we just talked about, to make the composition I want. My philosophy has always been to try to get the composition as close as possible in the field and then have the croppability part as kind of a backup thing, right? There's always going to be those times where we're not going to be able to get as close as we want, or the birds are really small or whatever. Use that croppability, that higher resolution for those scenarios, but keep in your mind and always be after making the image in camera that you really want as your final product. Okay, don't leave resolution. Change your philosophy when you go out in the field to getting lazy. Believe me, I've worked a week. This will sound crazy to y'all, and this is not a lie. I've worked a week to figure out, I'm up to here in mud, okay, laying prone, because I want green-winged teal males in full breeding plumage right in front of me foraging and doing their thing, right? And it's hard to find that because they forage in water about this deep. That's their preferred foraging habitat. And they're very skittish little birds. They're not like some ducks where you can walk right up to them like in the park and stuff like that. So it took me a week to finally find the position and get in there. And I get in there at 2 o'clock in the morning because they come in at dark 30 and start foraging. And I sit there for 8 hours to get those birds where I want them and photograph them for hours and hours. And they get used to you. You're sitting there. You're part of the landscape when they already got there and stuff like that. There's no substitute for the images I got. Resolution and staying back and high up on the levee in there and shooting down in there and then cropping and stuff. The images I could have got that way are nothing like the images I ended up getting by putting in the effort, okay? So don't let this high resolution stuff take away learning about your birds and making the effort to get as best a shot you can in the field. Instead, rely on it. When you can't do that, absolutely can't, or you just have to, crop a little bit more because of some other situation. With the higher resolution sensors, you have to be a better photographer. We're talking about birds in flight again, remember, right? When you shoot 24 megapixels, I've had so many clients say, I've gone from a 24 megapixel camera, or a 20 megapixel camera, or an 18 megapixel camera, and now I got the new mirrorless and I'm shooting 50 and I can't get a sharp freaking bird to save my life. They're transferring how they shot birds in flight from a 24 megapixel camera, and they're doing exactly the same thing with a 50 megapixel camera. You can't do that necessarily because you've got much more pixel data. Let's just talk about full frame sensors here, not crop sensors, but a full frame sensor. Of course, the pixel density on a full frame sensor with twice as many pixels is going to be twice as high. They're packed in there. When you shot a 24 megapixel sensor and the bird, you weren't panning quite right, same speed, it's smearing across the motion blur that you see in your images. Sometimes that's smearing across pixels, adjacent pixels. It's much less. So when you take that image home and you blow it up to 100%, 1:1, and you look at it, it's going to be pretty sharp. All right. You use that same exact technique and you shoot 50 megapixels, and then you go home and you were just as bad at panning as you were on the 24 megapixel, and you blow that up to 1:1, and it's going to look nowhere near as sharp. Okay, because you smeared across so many more pixels with your not panning accurately. Now, they say, okay, well, if you just downsample that 50 megapixel image to 24 megapixels, it'll look just as sharp. Oh, absolutely, it will. But aren't you defeating the purpose? I mean, then why shoot a 50 megapixel camera? I want my 50 megapixel shot of that bird to look tack sharp, whatever tack sharp is, when you're looking at a raw image. It's not going to be tack sharp until you process it and sharpen it, but I'm saying it should be sharp. The catch light in the eye should not be going whoop, a line across the eye. It should be a dot, pretty much. That means there's very little motion blur, as one example. Then you're taking full advantage of all that resolution, right? Otherwise, you're downsampling to get to the sharp shot. Well, you're throwing away that advantage. So you need to be better at panning to get those sharp shots at full resolution. Hey, how about you might have to crank up your shutter speeds a little bit higher before you could get those sharp shots at 1/2000th. Maybe now you have to shoot 1/4000th of a second for a while to get that same sharp shot that you got at 24 megapixels, right? But hopefully you'll get better. You'll get used to the 50 megapixels and you'll start being able to do exactly pretty much what you did with your 24 megapixel camera. But the reason you can do it is because you've improved, because you needed to improve, okay? So that's one bad side of shooting higher megapixels, is you got to be a little bit better at knowing and in your techniques when you're shooting birds in flight. There is nothing better than these high resolution things. This is basically a full frame shot. I wasn't trying to get the whole bird in the frame. But when you nail a shot close like that with all that resolution, the detail that comes out of that bird around the face and the eye and the fish, the minnow there, it's amazing. It's just unbelievably good, And that's what I'm after, taking full advantage of these higher resolution sensors. This is a big one. And this is not something, this is a bad thing. In some way. Data overload, right, with these higher megapixel cameras. And it's not just the higher megapixels, but now we're combining frames per second with the higher megapixels, right? So every shot you take isn't just more resolution, but it's a bigger file on your card, right? Mm-hmm. Now you're shooting at 40 frames per second, these big files. Boy, data stacks up quick. When you guys go out and shoot, and you have a good day of birds in flight activity, how many images do you come home with now?
1,500 to 2,000.
Okay, 1,500 to 2,000. That's a lot. That's a lot. You don't? Not that many? No?
3 times that much.
I was hoping you were going to say that. Because if you didn't say that, I was going to feel really bad about what I was, and embarrassed a little bit about what I was about to say. Because I come home now on a good shoot, and I go to high, target-rich environments. I get it, because I'm doing tours, right? Ospreys and roseate spoonbills coming and going from a rookery and stuff like that for 4 hours, right? How about 30 to 40,000 images in one 4-hour shoot at 45 megabytes or 20 megabytes per file, per image? Wow. So what do we do now? We're shooting 1 terabyte cards. You're not shooting 128 megabyte cards anymore, because you fill those things up in an instant, stuff like that. So data overload with all of this it can be
y'all are shooting mirrorless. I'm still shooting non-mirrorless.
Right. So you can't get those frames per second. I get it. But you would. But if you could shoot 30 or 40, you probably would be, and you'd be in the same boat we're in, right? Yeah. So we'll talk more about this data overload, because it's a real thing to deal with. Okay. The buffer wall thing. You know what a buffer wall is? I call it the buffer wall. It's your buffer in your camera, the internal memory, right? To shoot 40 frames per second, you're not shooting 40 frames per second and it's automatically going to your card. It's stopping on the way in the buffer of the camera. It can only hold so many shots. At 40 frames per second, and let's say 20 or 30 megabytes per image, you can hit a buffer wall really fast. So you're going as you hit the buffer. You go from 40 frames per second to 2. And when does that happen? Right when the best action's starting, right? So it's like, so how do you deal with that? Well, I'm having to hold before, like I said, we have higher resolution now, right? So I can start shooting that snail kite as it's coming much further out, I'm thinking. But I'm shooting, by the time I get to where it's nice and close, if it does get close and it does that flip right here, I'm out of buffer. Well, that stinks. So now I'm having to rein myself in and say, okay, here he comes. I'm not shooting. Oh, now he's close. Now I'll start doing my shooting, because I don't want to hit the buffer wall too soon. There's still very few. Now, the R1, because I'm only shooting 24 megapixels versus 45, it basically has an unlimited buffer. I can shoot forever at 30 frames per second, but not with the higher resolutions we're talking about. Not at 50 or 45. I don't know that there's a camera out there that can shoot unlimited 40 frames per second at 50 megapixels and just keep going forever and ever. You're going to hit a wall at some point. Okay. 10,000 plus images I put in here. We've been talking much higher than that. I didn't want to go too out of bounds. That's why I put the plus in there, though. Bigger cards, right? I'm shooting 1 terabyte cards now, not only because of this, but I also shoot video at the same time. Video, stills, because these are also really good video cameras. Now we're really cranking out the data, right? 1 terabyte cards, I can pretty much shoot all morning and still be okay, but we're not, again, shooting 128 megabyte cards anymore. These are expensive. It's a bad side of this. One of the bad things about all this advancement and all this speed advancement and everything, things are getting more expensive. Now I got to buy 1 terabyte cards. I used to be able to buy these cheapy little SD cards, 120. They didn't cost hardly anything. Now I want a 1 terabyte compact flash express card. What is that? $500 for one card? Stuff like they're coming down in price now. Unless you shoot Sony, then they're not. But but anyway, it's still more expensive to have a lot of these cards and stuff. So that's a bad thing. Transfers to when you get home. Got more pictures to put on hard drives on your computer. You need more of that. Those aren't super expensive anymore, but it's still more stuff to buy. How about slow processing of these larger images? Right? All these 30,000 images, and you got to go through these things. And they're all 30, 20, 30, 40 megabytes in size, and you got a slow computer. Well, that's going to be torture. So now I got to go buy a new computer or build one specifically for doing this. That's expensive. Can be. None of this stuff, who wants to spend all this money? I don't want to spend money on a computer. I want to spend money on that. Right? I want to spend money on a computer. But it's part of it. Culling 10,000 plus images. Okay, I saved the worst to the last here, right? How about 30 or 40,000? I am shooting 250 plus days a year. Okay, I can't get behind processing my images too much because I will never it would just overwhelm me. So I do my best to keep up. So I've had to modify my workflow, the beginning part of my workflow, to cull through all these images quickly and efficiently, still finding and picking out the gems in there, okay? And so I've had to modify things, and I'm going to give you a couple things that I did and I found that helped me greatly in this respect. I use Lightroom Classic to import, organize my images. And I went to get a drink, and then I forgot the other thing I wanted to grab. Let me turn this off, otherwise it's going to cause issues. Did last time. This mouse has saved my life, along with Lightroom Classic and the import dialog there. It's the MX Master 3S by Logitech, and it's got a really cool feature. When I scroll through my images, when I'm going through them, I don't bring home my card, stick it on my card reader, and then download 30,000 images onto my external hard drive on my desktop computer, and then cull them from there. Because then I'm only going to keep, out of that 30,000, on average I might keep 20, right? All of that on, all of it back off. That's dual the work. You're fragmenting your hard drives. Don't do that. I cull directly from my cards. Put the card reader in on the computer, card in, open up the card source in the import dialog of Lightroom Classic. That's my source, pick my destination, unclick the upper left-hand little box. All the images are not selected now. And then I go to the loop view, which is looking at one image at a time, and I go through every one of those 30,000 images in about an hour and a half. And how do I do that? This thing. The mouse wheel is how you scroll from image to image, right? You're using the center mouse wheel. Click, 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 click. You're going through each image. But this thing's kind of neat, really neat. So the mouse wheel on this mouse, when you spin it, there's an inertial weight in there that breaks loose, and it spins like a top all on its own. So I'm not having to do this. I go boing, and I'm watching the images, and it looks like this. I don't even have my hand on the mouse.
That's your import dialogue.
That's the import dialogue. I'm watching individual frames of my still images like a film, like a video. And when I see, because what I'm looking for is that perfect thing, right? The wings just right, the light just right, when the bird glanced. And so I'm spinning this thing, and I have my finger here, and when I see that, I just stop. I put my finger on it. It stops at that image. Then I go slowly. Check that one. Oop, 4 images down. Oop, I like that one. Check that one. I'm out of that sequence. I spin it again, and I go through. And I only end up checking maybe 20 or 30 images out of 30,000 when I'm done. But I go through them really, really quickly, okay? This mouse is the only one I know of that has that mouse wheel that's like that. And it just, without it, I was doing this, right? And, after a couple hours of doing it, the top of my hand was swelling up, and it was horrible. But I just showed you in that video that those pictures were scrolling as fast as you can comprehend them scrolling. It looks slower here because of the projector and everything. But my hand wasn't even on the mouse. It'll stop. It's like a top. A top doesn't spin forever. So it's like this, it's still going, and now it stopped. Now it's going, now it stopped. You can make it go even longer by pressing this button and taking the clicking part off. So now it's smooth, and now it'll spin even longer. So anyway, that mouse, if you want to get to doing this kind of thing, this mouse is something you might want to look into, along with how I put it together with Lightroom Classic. Now, the thing about, Lightroom Classic is that you do have to kind of have a pretty decent computer that has some power for it to load those pictures that quickly. Okay, but here's the key. Coming off of your card, it just seems to be more efficient and quicker than actually when you put it onto a hard drive that's actually connected directly to your computer. For some reason, it's just faster. With these compact flash express cards, the read speeds are so fast on those things. They tend to be much faster than most of the read speeds on your disk drives that you have connected to your computer. So if you try to do it the other way and put it on your computer first and do this, you're going to say, well, my computer, I can't do that. It doesn't work. Well, that's probably why, because I've had a lot of people try to adopt this, and then they say it doesn't work for me. And I said, are you putting it on your hard drives, or are you keeping it off of your card? And they almost always say it's on their hard drive. They say, don't. Try it directly from your card. Oh, yep, that fixed it. That was it. These cards are so fast. Yes?
So you're reading it with a cable off the camera, or you put your card in a reader?
Nope, putting a card in the reader. So a compact flash express card reader, fast cards, of course, right? And because of the speed of those things, being directly connected to a relatively new computer that does have some speed and power, generally, this is a Dell XPS laptop, and that video was taken here, okay? I added that when I got here, and it works on this computer. And it's not a cheap laptop, but it's not the super, super fastest thing either. So it will work, but you've got to do it from the card. I don't have that tutorial. I do. I have a YouTube video on my workflow. So you can go to that and you can see all of this. All about just like this. Yep.
How to hook it up.
Yep, it's all in there. The beauty of YouTube, right? So anyway, we're going to move on to autofocus, okay? So the good part of autofocus. So, where do you stop? Talking about the advances in autofocus systems with these mirrorless cameras that have come. It's crazy. When you shot digital SLR, at least when I shot a digital SLR, one little autofocus point, center of the frame, that's the fastest, most accurate autofocus point. You have to keep that on your flying bird, right? Somewhere. Breast, hopefully, right? Some people say, I keep it right on the head. Well, you're better than me. Okay, I tried to always keep it on the front end of the bird, right? Puts it halfway decent spot in the frame, too. But that's tough. Now, track the eye, track the head, track the wings flap, whatever. All these advances. It's just you could go on forever talking about them. I'm going to talk about some of the most important ones, I think, for birds in flight anyway. And this is it. Okay, so get ready now. You paying attention? Everybody pay? Okay, here we go.
ISO 16,000. And following that bird's head pretty much right up.
Okay, so that's a kingfisher coming off of a dive, right? That was slowed, that's quarter speed. okay? It takes that bird from the perch, down, catch a minnow or miss a minnow, come back up 1 to 1.5 seconds. That's it. It happens so fast that you can hardly perceive that you're trying to pan with this bird. And yet you saw that blue box, the autofocus, right on that bird's eye the entire time. Okay? I mean, good grief. When I used to go out and shoot, I've been shooting kingfishers. I do tours in the wintertime for kingfishers. I've been doing it for 15 years. When I was, of course, started, that single autofocus point. Keep it on that bird, down, up, right? 30 chances maybe in the morning, okay? I would be happy if I came home with 2 good series where I kept it on the bird, down and up. Now, if I come home and I missed a series, I'm disappointed. That's where this advancement has come. That's the most important, I think, that's occurred with autofocus. It's just this tracking is incredible. And now you can pick animals, people, vehicles. On these cameras, you can register a person's face. You're at a wedding. I'm a wedding photographer. No, I'm not. Thank God. But I am, let's say. I register your face in my camera. You're the groom. I follow you. My camera follows you throughout the entire crowd and everything. It just follows you because it's looking for your face. It's registered your face. That's incredible. What? So I get that capability in these cameras. So I go out to a lake and I try to, I'm going to register a barred owl's face. Right? No. It's only people. It's only people. But I bet you within 5 years, you're going to be registering the faces of animals. Your dog, your cat, your barred owl out at your pond that you like to go photograph in the morning. You're going to be able to do that. I guess that's a good thing. I don't know. But these tracking things, the identification things, just unbelievable. Just unbelievable. RTC stands for real-time composition. Okay, before, again, I keep going back to this one little autofocus point. We don't even talk about autofocus points anymore. It's areas now, tracking, in the center of the frame. Well, you really couldn't, when you're tracking a bird in flight, even if you were really, really good at tracking, which I'm pretty good at after 40 years of doing it and stuff, it's in but the autofocus point's in the center, so you didn't really have much option except the bird's going to be in the center of the frame. The chest or whatever that you're on is going to be in the center of the frame. Not anymore. Now the autofocus point, let's say you have eye detection on. It grabs a bird's eye, just like that kingfisher. Well, if it's a relatively slow bird, right, something like that, well, I can just move that bird where I want it in the frame. Like I said, I'm out to capture the composition I want in camera. I don't want it in the center of the frame and then have to crop and move it to the left because it's flying to the right. Why not just place it in the left-hand part of the frame as you're shooting? And you can do that now because you can move the bird over there and the autofocus point just, the point that's on the eye, just the focus follows it. Up, down. I shoot swallowtail kite tours. I take people to shoot swallowtail kites in summer in Florida when they're gathering before their migration. They come down and they skim on the water to drink before they fly out for the day and hunt and all that kind of stuff and then come back in the evening to that roost. Well, they have really long wings. And when they're on the water skimming, they keep their wings straight up like this, of course, to keep them out of the way, and they skim, they drink, and then they pump and they go up. Well, I want to position the bird low in the frame, of course, right? Because I don't want to cut off the wingtips. Before that I had to move the autofocus point down on my digital SLR to do that. Well, that made it no longer the center autofocus point, but a slower, less accurate autofocus point out near the edge of the frame. Well, that sucked because it missed autofocus more. Don't have to worry about that anymore. I can bring that bird down in the frame. The autofocus follows it. It's just as accurate anywhere throughout the entire frame, and away we go. Your real-time composition of your images now is totally possible. It's just up to you all to get good enough at tracking your birds to be able to do that. That is where I hoped, and I would hope that, how many enter your pictures in competitions? How many of you enter pictures in competitions? A lot of them say now no large crops, right, in the rules and the instructions for entering the competitions and stuff like that. I'm hoping that when And then you have to send in your raw image, right? If you're chosen, if you move on to, let's say, the semifinals or something, to say, okay, now we got to see your raw image to make sure you didn't add things, subtract things. It's not this huge ass crop, stuff like that. Well, I'm hoping that they're also going to start saying, like, okay, this is a full frame, kind of close to a full frame shot, but so is this guy's here, or this lady's here, but look at that. This is full frame composed in camera with that composition. And so this one moves on, this one does not. Okay, skill. Skill used to be just keeping on a bird with that single autofocus point. Now, because of this tracking stuff, we've got to up our level of what we consider the best photographers, the best photography, to things that are real-time composition at full frame levels almost, to where this person, otherwise, where is the skill going with all this technological advancement? Pretty soon, to get a bird, it used to be you could win a competition with this nice bird in flight shot. Well, not anymore. It's got to advance, right? You've got to require more of the photographer skills as this technology advances. Otherwise, where are we going? What's photography anymore if we don't have to do that? So anyway, that's a bad part. I'm getting ahead of myself. But the paradigm shift is you can try to real-time compose your shots. The bad part. Before your reference, your autofocus point was stuck. It wasn't tracking. It was stuck to a certain part of the frame. That was your reference for where you were putting your bird in the frame, right? Now it's moving all over with the bird. When I first shifted to that, my brain was all messed up. I'd get home and I'd look at my images and go, what the hell's the bird doing way up here in the frame? The autofocus, the little square was moving with the bird. My brain was still thinking it was welded to the center of the frame there. So now my reference is a moving target, and that kind of messed me up for a while. So I changed some things, and I use spot autofocus on Canon cameras now. Spot metering on my cameras. I don't use metering. I shoot full manual. But I put it in that mode for metering because it puts a circle, a gray circle in the center of the frame. That's the metering area, and it doesn't move. I don't need it so much anymore for that reference thing because I've gotten used to it, but it's still a great target for when you're shooting stuff that's super fast. Anybody ever go shoot puffins? Yeah. Those suckers are fast, right? So that guy's coming in and coming across. Real-time composition, sure, we're going to give that a try, but hey, how about just putting the bird's head in that circle and keeping him in the circle? Right? Now I'm panning at the right speed. I've got the reference to the center of the frame, and it's not moving. So again, one of the bad things about these tracking autofocus systems is you can lose your reference to where you are in the frame real easy. It can make you lazy. Panning. We're talking about birds in flight here, okay? Because the autofocus now moves with your bird, you're thinking, oh, I don't have to pan so accurately anymore because even if I'm a little ahead or a little behind, the autofocus is going to stay on it. I don't have to keep that little dot. What did the little dot welded to the center of the frame, your autofocus point, make you do? You had to keep it on the breast of the bird. You had to be panning at the same speed of the bird or very, very close. Now you don't have to. You can be too fast, too slow, too fast, up, down, and it's still going to be in focus. The autofocus is going to track it. But let's say it's still kind of dark in the morning and it's gorgeous light, but you can only muster 1/800th of a second, and you're not panning accurately now because you're getting lazy. Because the autofocus is doing most of the work for you and you're not panning accurately, you go home and none of those birds are sharp. There's motion blur all over the place. Don't let these tracking autofocus systems make you lazy panners, okay? Don't think that you can just, okay, I'm gonna back way out with my zoom lens on that kingfisher sitting on that perch. So I got the whole thing. He's gonna go from here to the water and up. And right, you put tracking autofocus on there, and you just don't even pan. You just let the autofocus get it in focus by panning itself, tracking the subject, backing up. Yeah, you have fun with that. It's not going to work. It just doesn't work. First of all, you got to pull way out, so now your bird's tiny, and then it will maybe track the bird, but because we don't even want to go there. It's just a mess. Track instead of getting lazy, make you better. The real-time composition thing again, right? Try to do that. It will make you pan for sure at the same speed that the bird's flying, because you can't real-time compose something if you're not. So anyway, don't let it make you lazy. Settings of the autofocus system in your camera. In the beginning of digital photography, there were settings in these cameras for autofocus. And you could make some changes and stuff, especially when mirrorless first came out even. But you could set a setting for, let's say, how sticky the autofocus would be on your subject to negative, or 4 steps up to positive. And you could go from one extreme to the other, and you wouldn't see a difference in the behavior of your camera at all. It never mattered. Well, you make mistakes now with your settings in your camera for autofocus, it can ruin you. Because we're in a whole different realm now. Before, autofocus systems were a separate sensor in your digital SLR camera. There's a pentaprism in there, and it redirected the image to the sensor for your picture and for a different sensor for your autofocus. There were no real algorithms or anything in there, right? It was just autofocus points, and whatever was on the point that was active, that's what I'm going to focus on. Pretty damn simple in the camera part. Now, we've got these tracking autofocus systems. It'll identify an animal if you set it to animals, people if you set it to people. The only way this works is the fact that your autofocus sensor now is your imaging sensor. It's one in the same. And in order to make that work, now, especially identifying animals versus people, identifying eyes, instituting zone autofocus, full frame tracking autofocus, now they bring in algorithms, right? And when you make changes to these settings, it institutes and runs a different algorithm, so it changes the behavior of the autofocus for that, right? So it's discrete now. Before it was just all kind of one thing. Autofocus point, points on the subject, that's what I'm focusing on. Now if you tell me to look for an eye and to look for an animal and to look only within this zone and all this kind of, now these are algorithms that are directing that autofocus system to do these specific things. And if you try to go outside those parameters, it's not going to work. You're not going to get focus, right? So what does that mean? It means you have to have these settings pretty much correct for what you're trying to do, or you're going to be frustrated. If you get them correct, wow, you won't miss focus hardly ever. So what I always tell people, how many of you, well, you were in my other, yeah, so you're going to hear the same things a few times if you see my talk. I always say, ask not what your autofocus system can do for you, but what you can do for your autofocus system. Some president said that in the past. I don't think it was about autofocus, but anyway, that's about the setting thing, right? Don't get lazy. Set up your autofocus system for the scenario you're shooting in and make the right choices and help your autofocus system do what it's capable of doing, and you won't miss focus, hardly ever. You ignore that and you make some wrong choices potentially. That's now it matters, right? These choices you're making, and it may really hurt you. Before it wasn't like that. Stuck in the mud, yeah. So I use that, again, the old autofocus systems, digital SLRs, whatever that autofocus point was on is what it's going to look to focus on. There should be something there to focus on. If you had that autofocus point on your bird and you press the back button or the half press to initiate autofocus and it missed and it went to the background, there was a setting in your camera to cycle, right, to try again. And you hit the button again, it would cycle, and then hopefully pretty quickly grab your actual subject. These mirrorless autofocus systems do not do that well. Have you noticed? When it gets stuck on something that it thinks is the subject, because again, it's running an algorithm now, okay, and it says, no, I've met the parameters of this algorithm, and you're pumping that button, I ain't refocusing. Well, that sucks. They get stuck. These autofocus systems get stuck on things that aren't your subject more, and pumping the half press or pumping the back button doesn't relieve it nearly as well as it used to on the digital SLR autofocus systems. So how do you get around that? Well, I have a button on I shoot back button autofocus on my cameras. The far right button I have set up on the back there is always set to spot. Because that spot, again, doesn't really run an algorithm. It's the old spot autofocus, like your old center. It makes it refocus quicker. If I go, I'm stuck. It's not focusing on you. It's focusing on the background. No, and I'm in zone. Let's say I'm using zone. Nope, it's not working. puts you in the center of that zone, hit that point spot button, that spot comes up right on your face, boom, it focuses right on his face. That's my kind of my way of getting around this behavior that isn't the greatest with these autofocus systems. And they're getting better though. I have noticed that in the latest cameras from Canon, like the R1 and the R5 Mark II, they're not getting stuck as much as like the R5 was. When I first got the R5, holy moly, that thing would get stuck on things that weren't my subject, and it was hard to get it off of that until I figured out this point, this spot autofocus trick that I use now, if you want to call it a trick, I don't know. But it works for me, so I always have spot autofocus available on a button to get to it quick. Oh, let's see.
If you stay in the same camera family,
Yep.
did they change like the settings you should use from version to version of the camera?
Not necessarily, not unless there's...
The Mark I R5 and I have a Mark II, are all the autofocus settings the same?
No. That's a huge difference, okay? That's what I was going to say. It depends on what you're talking about, how big of a change. The R5 is old now, 5 years old. Yeah. And then in the case of computers, and that's what we're talking about here, camera body's a computer, that's old. You have no flexible zones in the R5. The R5 Mark II has flexible zones. So you've got the square, right? The elongated horizontal, the elongated vertical. That's all you got for zones. I have flexible zone 1, 2, and 3 in the R5 Mark II and the R1. I can change the size of those and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, it's very different. And now in the R1, they actually added a new menu and separated out some things because they added more features. So it just depends on how big a jump or how small a jump you're talking about.
The R1 is later than the R2?
The R5 Mark II, yeah. It's the latest. It's their flagship, yeah.
The one is?
Yeah, the R1 is their flagship. The 1 series cameras in Canon have always been the professional flagship top model, okay? Then the R5s or the 5 series, if it was a 5D or a R5 now or whatever, those were kind of the hybrid cameras, the prosumer level, bringing in things like video first into those. It's kind of their experimental kind of in higher resolution. Their 1 series cameras were always lower resolution. Why? Faster frames per second, better light performance. That's getting a little fuzzier now, of course, with the technology moving along.
The ones are like $5,000-$6,000.
Yeah, well, the R1 is six grand. Yeah, the R5 Mark II, $3,500. You can probably find used ones now for less than that. But they're still pretty new. So, stabilization, right? We started out with stabilization in lenses. That was cool, right? Now we have IBIS, in-body image stabilization, coupling with, Canon calls it IS, Nikon calls it vibration reduction, VR. Sony calls it, what do they call it, steady shot or something like that, right? So it's all the same thing, but now we've got body where it's moving the sensor actually to stabilize it as you shake, in conjunction with moving the elements in the lens to counter shake. And boy, we're talking in certain lenses now, on my systems, on the Canon system, if I shoot the 100-5, 8 stops of stabilization strength. Whoa, 8 stops. What's a stop, right? It's just a unit of measurement. It's like an inch or a mile. It's just 1 stop is happening. It's light. It's the amount of light. If you could shoot in the past with no stabilization, and you had to shoot at 1/2000th of a second to get it stable, you kick in 8 stops of stabilization. Now, this is just you. It's not the bird, okay? It's like, okay, stabilization, baby, boom, the bird stopped. No, that's not the way it works. But anyway, 2,000th of a second to get a stable handheld shot at 600 millimeters. And now you kick in 8 stops of stabilization, and you can now shoot at 1/100th of a second. That's the kind of, that's it. Oh my God. You can now shoot. I will stand with 1,200 millimeters. I've done this just to do it. There's a bird perched there. I've got my 600 f4 with a 2x teleconverter on it. That's 1,200 millimeters. Handheld. 1/100th of a second. Pretty dark out. 1/100th of a second. Shooting a burst now. as fast a burst as you can shoot at 1/100th of a second. It's not 40 frames per second, but it's still like eight or so, tick, 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 right? So you have to do that. And I come out with 2 or 3 perfectly sharp shots. It's when the bird is perfectly still, right? Those are the ones that are going to be sharp. That was absolutely impossible in the past for several reasons. One, I'm shooting an electronic shutter. So now there's no shutter shake, right? There's no slapping of the mirrors. You could not do this in the past with digital SLRs. Unless you locked the mirror up, used live view on a you could do it. But if you tried to handheld with the shutter in the mirror, just the shutter slap alone would impart so much vibration to your system that you could not get that shot sharp, But now with the advent of stabilization, with electronic shutter and all that kind of stuff, you can handhold 1200 millimeters at 1/100th of a second and get sharp images, shooting a burst. It's just incredible. It's just incredible what we can do now. Could never do that before. The improved strength of these autofocus of these IBIS systems and IS systems are just amazing. The other great thing about it is it stabilizes your viewfinder, right? You put it in mode 1 or mode 2 on your lenses. If you're shooting these cameras with stabilization, a lot of it is controlled by a lens switch. Mode 1, mode 2, mode 3. They're for different things. Mode 1 for static stuff, mode 2 for panning, mode 3 for really erratic stuff, right? Well, when you're in mode 1 or mode 2, not only does it stabilize for the picture, but when you're looking through the viewfinder, all the shake that you're imparting disappears as well. Well, hell, that makes it a lot easier to track something that's bopping around or flying fast or anything. So hell, put it in mode 1 or mode 2 when you're doing birds in flight, right? No. Don't put it in mode 1. Mode 2, we talked about how strong these things are getting, and this is the bad part of it, and I'll talk about it more in a minute, but mode matters when it comes to stabilization. But you get the stabilized viewfinder, which is a big plus. It's a huge plus, right? But it not only, when things look stable to you through the viewfinder, they look stable to your autofocus system and your camera. And it's easier for your autofocus system to get pure lock on the eye of a bird, let's say, when that bird isn't all bouncing around in there because you're shaking all over the place. So it helps you get, not only through that, it helps the autofocus system directly by having this stabilized system. The bad things about this, mode matters. That's what I was just talking about. So on this lens, for example, my 600 f4, I've got those 3 modes. And like I said, mode 1's for static stuff, mode 2's for panning, mode 3's for real, erratic things. If you try, because this stuff is so strong now, you don't get 8 stops with this lens, more like 5, maybe 6 stops of stabilization. That's still really strong. Yeah. If you try to shoot in mode 1 while you're panning, you're in the wrong mode, and it's going to try to counter that. In the past, my first big white, they call them, right, big white lenses, was a 500 f4. It was the first version of it with stabilization in it. It had mode 1 and mode 2. I kept it in mode 1 all the time for panning. I'm a bird and flight guy. It gave me that stabilized viewfinder, which helped me, but it was so weak in its actual stabilization capabilities that I could overwhelm it when I was panning. I could still stay on my birds beautifully. The viewfinder was stabilized for me. It didn't impart any movement or motion blur into my images. You try to do that now? Hell no. Too strong now. Mode 1, you're panning and it's doing this. You could visibly see it. I can't stay on a bird. If all of a sudden you have lost all of your ability to pan with a bird, check your stabilization setting. It's probably on mode 1. Put it on mode 2 and you'll be right back in action again, because mode 2, it's accelerometers and all that kind of stuff in here, right? It says, oh, Ron's panning left to right. We won't stabilize that, but he's also going up and down a little bit. We'll stabilize that, right? The problem with mode 2, all of a sudden the bird does that flip, right? And I do this. Well, for a split second there, the camera can't adjust. The stabilization says, hey, you were just panning like this, and now you're panning like that. And these first couple images, when you made that transition, are going to be all messed up because it's trying to transition as quickly as it can to now not stabilizing this, but that's where mode 3 comes in. If you're shooting really erratic stuff and you're making these transitions really fast, you don't want to be in mode 2 because it's going to be having some issues. Mode 3 only stabilizes at the instant the picture's taken. Okay? The problem with mode 3 no stabilized viewfinder, okay? Because it doesn't do it, unless you're shooting, it's stabilized, but if you're just trying to get on a bird and you're not shooting yet, there's no stabilization. It's only happening at the instant you take the pictures. So there's some drawback to that. But mode matters now. It used to not matter so much, but it matters a lot now. But hey, that's the only bad thing. How about that? Post-processing, again, we can go lots of advantages. We've talked about some of them. Being able to deal with higher ISOs. You can shoot higher ISOs now because the noise reduction software that we have available, to apps, whatever you want to call them, so much better now. The noise is more uniform, easier to take out, like we talked about and stuff like that. So we can shoot at higher ISOs, knowing that even if our images are a little noisy, we can probably salvage it, because now these programs, I use Topaz a lot, almost always, and it identifies, its algorithms and AI identify the noise pattern, and it'll even take the noise off of your bird without taking out the feather detail. It can tell the difference. In the past, that was not possible. Now, if the noise is so bad that the detail wasn't captured in the first place, and you take the noise out of your bird, well, there was no detail captured, so it's still going to look like crap. So what are you going to do? But you can generally shoot at higher ISOs now, knowing that you can probably deal with it much, much better than you used to.
Which version of Topaz are you using?
I use a combination of denoise AI and also photo AI, because they have different capabilities. Photo AI does better at really heavy noise removal. I like denoise because it gives me the most natural look. Okay, if you've got an image that you absolutely have to salvage and it's noisy, photo AI will probably do it for you, but it's going to look a little funky, in the sense of detail on your bird and stuff like that, more than if you use, and I love the algorithm in denoise AI, clear. Clear is amazing. It's like freaking magic. Those of you who know Topaz, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I love it. Be confident shooting at higher ISOs, because post-processing has come a long way. It's a lot of these same things. You can shoot slower length. All this stuff comes around because you can better deal with it in post-processing. Topaz, like I said. The thing about the sharpening now in Topaz, before or in DxO Raw or any of these now that are using AI and deep learning and stuff, sharpening used to be a fake on our brains. What it did is it just enhanced edge contrast in your images. And it made your brain and think it was sharper, but it wasn't sharper. What's happening now in these, there's actual pixel realignment being done by these software packages, okay, these apps. So they analyze specific parts of your image, and different images will have different key points that it'll find. If it finds enough key points, it can take a pretty soft image and make it tack sharp. One thing I always use as an example when I talk specifically about Topaz and stuff like that is the catch light in a bird's eye. If it's a pinpoint, that's there's no motion blur, there's nothing. But if it's smeared, right, it's elongated, well, that's one of the things that Topaz algorithms look for. They look for that and they say, hey, that should be a pinprick. That should not be smeared like this. So what are we going to do? We're going to take this pixel and move it here, 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 and take all that smear of that catch light and make it a pinpoint the way it's supposed to be. Oh, that claw on that talon down there, that should be, that tip of that should be a pinpoint, right? And it's not. And they look for these key things, and then they do, and they all... I've worked with a guy that's an ambassador for Topaz and an engineer for Topaz, and they've got some examples of where you can actually, when it's applied, you can see your subject move. It realigned almost the whole, it's like a little bit, and it, whoop, you can actually see it happen. This is true pixel alignment, this realignment, and this is true sharpening.
So it's like going from out of focus to in.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's a great analogy. Before it was just faux stuff. Now we're doing real sharpening to these things. And it's still, thank God, you can't take something totally out of focus and make it look great, but boy, it can do so much. It can do so much now, which is nice overall. But of course, there's some bad things too. People still overprocess their images. You see it. We all see it. We've all done it. I've done it. I have to hold myself back sometimes. I'll process a bunch. Sometimes I'm processing till late at night and stuff. purposely get up the next morning and re-look at the images I did. I'm going, Ron, what are you doing? That's totally over-sharpened. That doesn't look right, or this didn't work, or whatever, So the pitfall is still there of over-sharpening things. I've looked at people's birds. I've judged competitions. Only birds, though. Bird photography, part of competitions and stuff like that. And you swear if you dropped that bird, it would shatter. It's so over-sharpened. It looks so brittle, and stuff like that. You want things to look natural. And so, watch for that. And the biggest one now is the reliance on AI, right? Again, let's try to let's keep our art there, skill levels there. Try to get great images in the field. Don't rely on AI to fix all of the deficiencies in your imagery. Just don't. They're there to help you, and that's great. We never had true sharpening before. We can now use AI instead to bring out your images to the point where they belong. We're shooting raw images, right? They're not sharp. They're not contrasty. The colors are muted, stuff like that. That's the raw data. We now have the tools to bring out the very, very best and make our images the best they could ever be. Use AI for that. Don't use it to try to salvage garbage, okay? It just is, that's just hurting our art. It's hurting what we're doing out there. Garbage in, garbage out. That's what I'm saying. It still applies, at least to me. There's things now, AI can just make you a picture. Hell, you don't even have to go out there and take it, and it's so good in some instances that you can't tell the difference, that it wasn't an actual picture taken by a camera. A guy demonstrated that in a major competition. He had AI generate a picture. He entered it. He was hoping he was going to at least place in it for this purpose. He did. I think he took honorable mention with the image. And then he came out and said, hey, you guys just gave me honorable mention on a picture that wasn't even taken by a camera. Wake up. AI is going to destroy photography if we're not careful. He was trying to make a point, and he made a point. And of course, they were mad. The competition was mad that they were made to be the example of this, but it was a good thing, I think, overall. And we should all try to make sure that this AI thing, and not just in photography, I'm a little scared about.
It's scary.
Yeah, it can be scary coming up out there. Who knows, what's going to happen here. The really ugly thing, again, if you forgot the title of this talk, the good, the bad, and the ugly about all of this. The ugly part is that ideal. Basically, it's keeping me in business, okay? It's my, other than my tours and my harness. When people come to me, they're frustrated, they're mad, the complex, all of this stuff that's come along, all these advancements, and then the great flexibility that it gives us, but complexity comes along with it, right? And there's so many people that just cannot figure these menus and these cameras out. They do these settings. I used to be able to take great pictures. Now I can't take great pictures. What's going on? And they get mad. They get upset. I had a woman come she was crying. She spent all this money on this R5 Mark II and a 600 f4, and she used to take great pictures, and now she's moved up to mirrorless, and now I can't get these settings right. That's the ugly part of technology, right? It makes things more complex. It gives you more flexibility, more that you can really meld everything that you do and really get nitty-gritty about it. But for a lot of people, it's just too much. It's just too much. And I don't want to see this technology advancements ruining, people having a good time out in nature, taking pictures and stuff like that. So, the best thing you can do, what I tell people is, for most of these settings, the ones that really matter, there's a middle ground, right? If you can't figure out what a setting does or whatever in a camera, just set it to the middle setting. Don't set it to one of the extremes, because like I said earlier, these settings matter now. Set it in the middle, you're probably going to be just fine. Or if there's not that kind of setting, if it's an on-off thing, just turn it off. If you don't know what it does, just turn it off. Turning things off usually isn't going to be such a bad thing, unless you're turning off servo autofocus when you need it, that kind of thing. But I just don't want, it's pervasive, it's out there, it's really out there. And I don't know, I don't know what the average age of the person in this room is, but it's not 23, okay? And my clients, they're up there in age. And hey.
I identify as 23 sometimes.
Well, me too. Yeah, I can go with that. But what I'm getting at here is, hey, there's no question that our cognitive abilities and our ability to concentrate for long hours and stuff goes down as we get older. I'm not 23 anymore either. So I get it. I get the people that are really doing a lot of this stuff have the time, have the money and stuff to do this. They get into these complex things. They just don't, it's not that they can't do it, they just don't maybe want to do it, okay?
Yeah, but part of it is the manufacturer's manuals.
Oh, yeah. Well, the manuals, why do you think YouTube channels are blowing up and everything? Because that's why I do them.
Right.
Specific to these cameras and stuff. Because the manuals, first of all, they're that freaking thick now, right? And then they don't even go into the details of like the autofocus, this setting or that setting. It's very frustrating. And for people that come from certain generations, reading things and going through manuals is part of our lives forever, And now you're getting these manuals and they mean they're just not covering what we need to cover.
They tell you go here, but they don't tell you where here is.
Yeah, right.
Is it good to buy a book on the camera?
Nope. No. Not anymore. I would say don't. Okay? Because, and I'm not just saying me, but there's people like me out there. For every camera that's basically in the realm of, let's just stick with birds in flight, okay? The Sony camera bodies that are good for action, the Canon cameras, the Nikon cameras are good for action. There is somebody like me, many people like me, for each one of those brands and camera bodies specifically, that has done a detailed YouTube on setting these cameras up. They've gone through the entire menu, and it may not be so much for the exact type of thing you're doing, like birds in flight, but they will explain what each one of those things does. Okay, each one of those settings, this setting does this setting does that. So at least you'll have an understanding of what they do. That is the best source now for understanding your cameras. Be careful. Find one or two YouTubers that do the type of photography you do, and they seem to do the same things and set things up kind of the way you do, and stick with them. The other thing that happens, I get people coming, I've watched 8 different people setting up their R5 Mark II. They all, for birds and flies, they all do it differently. I'm even more confused than when I started. Everybody's a little different, okay? I'm not saying I'm the right person for you to watch, or Mark Smith for Sony is the right person to watch, or, Alan Murphy is the right person to watch for Nikon. I'm not saying that. Find somebody, though. There's somebody out there that you can follow their channel, and they'll probably keep you from getting confused, because everybody does things a little bit differently. And some of the worst things you can do is listen to, how many of you golf or did golf in your life? That's another one. It's like photography. You watch how to grip a club. You can find 85 million different ways. Every instructor that you see their YouTube grips a club differently. So it's just like you can get really confused if you don't kind of rein yourself in a little bit on watching YouTube videos. But it's a great source now. It really is. Yep, that's right. That's right. So hey, that's it. That's all I've got for you. But the whole purpose of this was to don't get frustrated. If you are, and or if you know anybody that is, there's help out there, and I'm willing to help people. I shot Sony, I shot Nikon, I shoot Canon mostly now, but I can help people with a lot of different things, and there's other people out there that are willing to do it too. So, it's just, there's resources, and with the technology we have now, it really should be making your work out there with birds and flight all that much more enjoyable, because I hope you're getting more good images. So much more good than bad. I mentioned some bad things, but the good of this technological stuff, advancements, far outweighs the bad for the most part. It's brought so much to so many people, allowing them to do things that they could never do before. And I love that. I think it's great. But I put the bad and the ugly thing in there just to kind of temper our, what we're doing and keep us from falling into those pits that you can fall into. I do it. I'm out there every day just about shooting if I'm not doing something like this, and I still fall into some of those things, F4. It's like, hey, Ron, stop down a little bit every once in a while. Change up the looks of your images every once in a while. Come on, stuff like that. So, anybody have any questions? Any more questions? Grab my water. Yeah.
How familiar are you now with Sony? If someone came to your workshop with a Sony and had some settings that were off of it?
I can deal with it. Yeah, I can deal with it. They haven't changed so much. The last camera that I have, I still have it, is the A1. I don't have the A1 Mark II. I don't have the A9 III. I know the A9 III is a kind of a different animal, right? There's a global shutter and stuff in there, and I haven't messed with that. But for the most part, with the things that we would have to deal with to get you on track for doing like one of my tours, birds in flight type thing, I could pretty much help you. There are better people to help you, absolutely, probably. And if I don't keep up with it, the further on down the road we go, I may not be able to help as much as I used to. But the general menu structure and how it's organized, and Nikon cameras and Sony cameras and the settings and stuff and what they do, I definitely can still help you.
Do you use red dot?
No.
That goes on the.
No. Nope. You know, I haven't even tried one, to be honest, but I have clients quite often that come out with he's talking about the sights that go on top of your camera, right? Because it's hard to field the view, right? And hard to find that bird. And here it's much easier to find the bird and put that red dot on there and stuff like that. And hopefully then the autofocus does catch. You don't know though, right? You don't know if it does because you're not looking through your viewfinder. And so to me, I've never had the need to do it, because I've always been pretty good at panning with my subjects. I like to, again, now we're talking about real-time composition. You can't do that, you know, when you're looking through that sight. You can't tell if the autofocus has actually grabbed where you want on the bird or not, looking through one of those sights. So no, I don't use them. But hey, if that's what it takes, if that's what you need to use to be able to get on a bird consistently and stuff like that, that's fine.
Looking through the viewfinder, you get more of what you see is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
If you use the pointer,
yeah,
you're getting what you'd like to get. You're seeing, but you may not be seeing.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't messed with one on, you know, like I say. So if I tried one, actually, I might be able to give you a little more insight about what I think about it. But in general, I've never needed it. And to me, photography is looking through a viewfinder of a camera. You know, so that's kind of takes me away from that. The one reason why I hated mirrorless for a long time, right? So much of my photography wasn't actually taking pictures, but I was looking through an optical viewfinder through a really expensive, it's gorgeous, right? And I'm watching, I'm a bird behavior biologist, okay, a research biologist. So that was my enjoyment, is seeing this crystal clear, beautiful image of this bird foraging and stuff like that through my camera viewfinder. Going to those TVs now, the little LCD screens you have in there, early on, the resolution of those things sucked. So now you're taking away my enjoyment, a lot of my enjoyment. When I'm looking through that viewfinder, I'm not enjoying it as much anymore because it's looking pixelated to me. It's looking not clear to me.
Like low res.
Yeah, low res. Now, the R1, I forget what the resolution of that viewfinder is now. I don't even remember now that it's not on optical viewfinder. We're beyond that now. But again, looking through that little site, that kind of does that same thing for me. You know, it would, I think, would kind of take me away from the photography element. Yeah, so.
On your Canon cameras, pre-capture mode, do you have a minimum shutter speed you have to set?
I don't know if I know the answer to that, because I mean I've used pre-capture at pretty slow shutter speeds, down to 1/100th of a second, and so any lower than that, I mean I you know, there's no really use for that for me anyway. So I've never really tried pushing it any lower than that. So. Yeah, no, I'm almost positive I've been as low as 1/100th of a second. So I don't know that there used to be. Now the R7 did. I remember encountering that, and also the way it processed all the images. It put them into a group, and it was horrible. I hated the way they implemented that in the R7. But the R5 Mark II now and the R1, it's completely different. It was JPEGs only then too. Now it's raw images are captured. So it's come a long way. But I'm going to look into that though, because I can't answer that specifically. I'm going to have to look and see if there's a minimum shutter speed.
Turn it off.
Yeah. Well, you know what? But I had a negative view of pre-capture. When it first came out, and I didn't have it yet in the Canon camera, and when it first came out in OM systems, I think were the first ones that had it. I'm thinking, you know, this is just another thing that's going to ruin bird photography, because now you don't have to be quick to get those takeoff shots anymore. I felt I liked it. I was quick, and I could get shots that a lot of other people couldn't, and that puts me ahead of people and stuff like that. And now anybody can get, you know, everything, you know, the whole takeoff without even having any skill at all, you know. But now pre-capture, pre-continuous shooting is on Canon cameras, and I'm using it, and I don't feel that way anymore. Okay. The takeoff shot, because the takeoff thing is just one small part of what pre-continuous shooting, pro capture, whatever you want to call it, can do for you. The one example that I've used before is this snail kite, right, flying by. I do a lot of snail. They forage, they go and they flip over and they do it. Well, in the past, because they flip so quick and you don't know when it's going to happen, if you're not shooting, basically, you're not going to get it. When it happens, if you're not shooting at the instant it starts, you're not going to get it so fast. Well, before, to get around that, what I did is that here comes that kite. I'm bursting, right? Shoot, 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 hoping it's going to flip over. Nope, never does. So now I've got 1,000 images that are useless. I'm just going to throw them away. Well, pre-continuous shooting, now as that bird's coming, I'm just holding half press. It's going through its loop, you know, capturing images, but not recording them to the card. If the bird never flips, I just lift my finger off the shutter. Nothing's recorded to the card, and I save having to throw away and go through thousands of images that are useless. Now it's like half press, pre-continuous, the bird flips over, starts shooting just like it normally would. It captured the whole thing before it, during it, and after. I love it. So there's, you know, I didn't think of, until you have that in your hand to use and experiment with, there's so many things you don't think of. The applications just don't come to mind. But now that I have it in these cameras, it's like, oh, well, I can use pre-capture here, and this is great, you know. And it's not really about skill, right? It's not taking the skill away. You still have to know the behavior of the bird. You still got to know that it could potentially do that and stuff. So my whole feeling about pre-capture, or whatever you want to call it anymore, isn't so negative anymore. It's just another advancement that you can either take advantage of or not. And if you don't like it and you're that hard-headed about it, like you said, turn it off. You don't have to use it. No one's forcing you to use it, you know.
Between that and your mouse, you save a lot of time.
Yes, of course. And that, you know, when you do it as a business, you know, then those little savings really add up, you know, because I just can't let myself get behind in working, you know, going through my images, not necessarily processing them, but at least calling them out, right, and getting them, you know, stored where I want them so I can go back when I have time and use them for a talk or whatever I'm going to use them in. You know, if I just have all these images sitting, you know, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 of images all over the place,
Some people never go through them.
Well, I know people like that. I know none of you do this, right? Where you never format, you reuse your cards, you just go out and buy new cards all the time as they fill up? I know somebody like that.
It's too expensive.
Yeah.
I mean,
Cards cool?
I went over to his house. This is how I found out about this, right? He started out as a client, and then he became a client friend, you know, and then just a friend, you know, over time, 10, 12 years or whatever. So I end up over at his house one time, and I'm in his little studio where his computers are, where he does his quote unquote, supposed to be processing his images from his photography stuff. And I noticed on the shelf next to his monitor, this bag full of cards. SD cards, compact, now the next bag has compact flash express cards in it. I'm going, I'm not going to use his name, I'll just call him Joe. You know, I said, yeah. I'm going to go, hey Joe, what's with all the cards? He goes, what do you mean? I go, those are my images. I'm going, what do you mean those are your images? He says, well, when a card fills up, I put it in the bag, and I go buy a new card, and I put it in my camera. And I'm going, and I was speechless, really. You know, I didn't really know what to say. I said, so you don't go through your images, download them on a regular basis, and then reformat your card. You know you can reuse your cards. You know that. He says, oh, I know that, but I don't have time. So when I retire, his whole plan was, when he retired, now he's going to go to the bags, right? And I go, okay. I said, Joe, listen, do me a favor. Yeah, I said, do me a favor. I do. No.
That's a card hoarder.
Yeah, that's a card hoarder. But here, so I said,
Yeah, because that's enough money to buy some new cameras and lenses. Okay.
I said, Joe, do me a favor. Do me one thing. My little thing came off my microphone here. These things exist, okay? These security, 2 terabytes on one, 4, even 8. Just start at least downloading them to these things, and then donate your cards or something to people who need them or something, because I just can't handle this. That's what I told him. I said, this is crazy, you know. I don't know what he ever did, because I never went back over there,
The same thing.
and we never broached the subject again. But you know, it's weird, you know, how people.
Back on my years or something.
Yeah, it's just you take after you've been doing a certain thing for a long enough time, you just assume things that everybody's kind of doing things kind of the same way, you know. But then you find these people that's like, no, they're not doing it the same way, you know. And well, then you get introspective, right? And you start thinking, well, is that better? Well, that's obviously not a better way. But you know, it's not bad to find people that are doing things a little bit different, you know, than what you're doing it, because sometimes you find some really cool things.
But usually, most people, at least, talking about myself, if I have a certain way of doing something, and I've done it for a while,
Yep.
and somebody comes and he says, hey, Carlos, have you tried doing it this way? I said, no. I tried doing it that way. You know what? That way's better.
Yeah.
And I'll change.
Yep.
I'm not.
Well, that's
stubborn about
good. And I will, you know, I was trained as a scientist, right? So the scientific method and all that, open, non-biased, right? We're human beings. We're biased. We're biased, you know, we're innately biased, okay? But being trained as a scientist, you try to overcome those biases and stuff like that. So I'm like you. I have a relatively open mind about just about everything I find myself involved with, including photography. Okay, so if someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, you know, why are you doing it that way?" and I go, "Well, that's the way I've always done it," or something like you're saying, and they say, "Well, I do it this way," and then I'll go, "Oh, well, that's interesting," and I might not say right then and there, "Oh, that's better," but I'll think about it. I'll go home and say, "Yeah, he was doing it that way. I'll try it that way," and sometimes I say, "Yeah, just like you. Hey, that's a good way to do it. Never thought about that," or I'll say, "Hell no, I ain't doing that," you know. But you know, it's you can get into a rut in anything you do, you know, and that's why I love doing this kind of stuff. Okay, because I've had people like this question right here. It's like, is there a minimum shutter speed? I don't know exactly, you know, because I shoot at such high shutter speeds most of the time because I'm shooting birds in flight all the time, right? So I don't get down really low a lot, you know. And if I'm in those low, slow situations, am I even using pre-capture anyway? You know, would it really fit? You know, maybe not. But anyhow, you know, it's good to get out and hear other views of things.
Now, what kind of shutter speed do you use to capture the kingfishers?
Well, again, it's not you know, necessarily that you need fast shutter speeds because the bird's fast. If you're good at panning, if you're good. No, and I've got images where I'm trying now because I've got about 75,000 images of belted kingfishers because I do tours every year and I've been doing them for 15 years. I tried to shoot slow shutter speeds on purpose, right? Because I want wing blurs and stuff. And the splash of the water looks different at slow shutter speeds, of course, than it does at really fast shutter speeds. So I'm trying to pan very accurately, shooting as fast of frames per second as I can muster at the shutter speed I'm shooting at, and trying to pan really accurately, because if you pan really accurately, your body of your bird, your eye should be sharp. The wings, of course, different plane of movement, so they are going to be blurry, and that's what I'm after. The water's going to be blurry and stuff. So you don't need to, but if you're just doing it and you want tack sharp shots of the bird, wings stopped, stark still, nice and sharp and stuff like that, 1/4000th of a second.
Mode 3?
No, mode 2. Because it's pretty, you know, it's down, up. Now, sometimes I regret that because on the way up with a fish, he'll lose control of the fish. Okay? And I can guarantee you, I've seen it happen many times over 15 years, and the amount of times when that bird loses track of that minnow or fish on the way up, the number of times that fish hit the water again, 0. He catches it back in the air every time. Every time. You saw the pictures. I don't know where they are in here. But, you know, beak open, minnow up here. Well, that wasn't the flying fish that he's catching, okay? He caught it in the water. He lost track of it. He lost control of it on the way up. but he grabbed it again. And it happens so fast. You can't perceive it. Your brain and eye cannot comprehend it through a viewfinder of a camera. Can't. So if you're in mode 2 and he does that and you just see the bird go, you're just doing this. There he goes down to try to grab the fish. Well,
So you know he's gonna catch it now, so now you can start going down.
well, yeah, but it happens so fast. It would be better to be in mode 3, right, for stabilization. But for the most part, everything you're doing in mode 2 is the best, and you don't know when he's going to lose track of a fish, or lose handle on a fish. So, you can't always be in the optimal settings, but that's shutter speed will help you there. That's why I say I set my stuff up for action all the time. If I can muster 1/8,000th of a second out there shooting the kingfisher, I will be at 1/8,000th of a second because of those potential things happening. Because it's just a reaction by you. And hopefully you just got the bird in there and he didn't move so much out of, I don't know if the focus is going to stay on that bird or not, but hopefully he didn't move too close or further away. The shutter speed will stop it for you. That's what you're hoping for. And a lot of times it
Also,
doesn't.
what may happen, he drops the minnow, whatever, and you freeze.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've done that. Well, sometimes it happens so fast that I'm just...
Yeah.
And then he's back up on the perch, and I'm not back on the perch yet because I don't know where the hell he went, or she, so, but they're so fast. Some of this stuff happens so fast that you really can't, you just plan the best you can for that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then you just react. So anyway.
If you take a bird with the fish in the air and you turn it 180 degrees, it looks like the fish is carrying the bird.
There you go.
It's cool.
Yeah. Well, I've had people say that. It's like you get a really cool image and then they say, well, and it's like this, right? And you said, no, it was shot like that and you just turned it like that and cropped it. And said, no, I didn't. There's a lot of scenarios like that of pictures that can be moved around and turned around and made look like something's going on that really didn't happen, But yeah. Everybody good?
Very good.
Super.
Would you say the name of that mouse again?
It's, here you go.
Here, I'm gonna take a picture of the box.
So I'd planned on bringing my mouse, that mouse, it's the older version, this is the newer one, the S version is the newer one, with me for the purpose that I just used it for, and I forgot it. So I ordered one on Amazon and had it delivered here, just for you all.
What a guy.
All right? But I needed a new one anyway. The other cool thing about this mouse, okay, is that you don't need multiple, like this has Bluetooth, your desktop has Bluetooth, your tablet has Bluetooth or whatever. On the back here, you can see it says 1, 2, and 3. So you can register 3 different computers to this mouse. Wow. So when I go home, I'll press it and go to 1, and it'll work on my desktop. I'm going to use it on here. I press it, it goes to 2. I use it on my notebook. So it's really, and it's not super expensive. Yeah, and it comes with software, an app that you can then customize all the buttons to do different things. And it's not like it's $300. It's like $98 or something like that. So it's not super cheap, but it's a great mouse, and I love it. And it's ergonomic. This is a button here in the pad. This is a button, this is a button. You got a scroll wheel here, you got button here, and then of course your mouse wheel, and you can press down on your mouse wheel. That's another button. So there's like 15 different buttons on this thing, and you can program them to do all sorts of different things. I keep mine pretty simple, but it's capable.
The main use is to go through the image.
Oh yeah, that's why when I found this, and I forget who told me about it. It wasn't my original find. It was another photographer that said, hey, there's a mouse out there. When you spin, because I was complaining at the time, because, oh God, my hands were just getting sore and everything. Tendons were getting sore. And he says, there's a mouse out there where you spin that wheel, and if you spin it fast enough, it breaks loose like a top. It just spins on its own. And at first I'm going,
Can't imagine.
I get it, I guess. I get the how that would be better. But then I got it, and I tried. Oh, my God. It was just like, oh, yes. Yeah, especially when, nowadays when we're going through so many images. Yep. Yeah, so and another nice thing about this one, this is the S version over mine. Mine is pretty good, the older version. This will track on anything. You could put it on clear glass and it works. So no matter where you find yourself working on your laptop, it could be on this black cloth, it could be on this stuff, it could be on the floor, it could be on your hand. I've used my leg in airports, right? Because you have nothing to do. I'm moving my mouse on my leg, you know, and it'll work. These new mice are just so good at tracking on anything. The old ones, if you didn't have it on a mouse pad that had a certain pattern, it wouldn't work, you know, but that's not the case anymore. So I really love it. So anybody, you can have the box. I don't even need the box. So if you just want to pass it around, take a picture, I don't care. I don't even care if I get it back, to be honest with you.
Do you use a tablet ever
For what?
for your processing?
Nope, never do. I really, to be honest with you, hate to ever